Hello everybody, welcome to number 27. I'm Jack and today I'm going to be talking to you about a car that has an Italian name, British heritage, but a German heart. This is a Bertini GT25. And I can guarantee that the vast majority of you will have absolutely no idea of what it is. When I first got to my old house, I saw this in my neighbour's drive, and for the life of me, I had no clue. It is in fact a BMW Z3 based kit car, and I thought it would be really interesting today to discuss the pros and cons of a project like this. So initially I'm going to talk to you a little bit about Z3s, the cars that this is based on. Then we're going to talk about the kit itself, what it actually is, what it does, and how expensive it is. Then drive the car, get a feel for it, because this kit actually makes a difference to the way the car drives. I'll describe why in a moment. And then finally we can try and make a decision on whether it's a worthwhile thing or not to do. So first of all, the Z3s that this is based on, when they first came out, they were actually it was a bit of a damp squid really, and that was mainly because the 4 cylinders came out first, and they weren't really a brilliant drive, so they were overshadowed. They had 3 different competitors in different sectors, so they had MX-5, Boxsters and Elises. The MX-5 was a competitor for the 4-cylinder cars. And it was just a sharper drive, it was cheaper, it was easier to run, so it was a bit of a no-brainer really. Then against the Boxster, well, the 6-cylinder cars were its natural competition, and the 6-cylinder cars of the Z3 were miles better, much more interesting, much more fun to drive, great engines. But the Boxster dynamically was far superior, and if we then go and talk about the Elise, well, that's on a whole other plane altogether. Nonetheless, I actually like Z3s, and I think that especially in recent times, the look has really come on, and if you get the facelift with the wider arches, I really like them. My friend has just bought a Z3 3-litre, which is pretty much the same car that this is based on, so it'll be really interesting to use that as a comparison. But having seen that recently, I really like the way that looks. I was quite surprised, but I think they're nice looking cars. They've matured really well. So the Bertini kit. Okay, well, the name may sound Italian, but I think they just did that for marketing purposes. It was a company based in England. I think it was in Berkshire. Essentially, it comprises a front clamshell, the rear clamshell. So what you have that remains of the Z3 is the windscreen and the doors pretty much, and the sill covers as well on the side. The rest has been changed. So I think looks are quite an important reason why you would do something like this. And I think that they did a good job, considering that they had to stick with the existing structure of making something that looks really distinctive and different. And from some angles, I think it looks really pretty. But it's not fully resolved, and from some other angles, it doesn't look right, particularly from the back. Now, interestingly, it actually has 993 rear lights as well. That was a weird choice to make, Porsche 993 rear lights, because they wouldn't really be the cheapest. Now, at the time when this kit came out, in about 2014, 15, I think, Z3s were at the peak of, well, right at the bottom of the curve of their values. So it actually made, it made sense if you wanted something that you wanted to drive that was a bit different, a convertible, you didn't like the ways that the Z3 looks, some people don't, then this was a natural progression. Plus, this does have one major advantage, and that is that this kit saves, because it's all fiberglass, it saves about 60 kilos from the overall weight. I've driven this car before, and I can tell you that you can definitely feel that. That this car drives, it's had a couple of minor modifications, but the way this drives is the way the Z3 should always have driven. Another reason why these were criticised when they came out is that it was a car that was based on really old technology. So the front end is derived from the E36, which was a model that was just about on the way out, I think. But the rear suspension actually dates back to the E30, which is, it's a trailing arm arrangement. And that's a car that first came out in 1982, so it is quite old tech really. So how does this drive? Well, with the lower weight and the fact that Jacob has put Polyflex bushers on it, this is a massive amount of fun, I have to say. So I drove as a completely standard version of one of these, and it's a lovely car to drive, but it feels very different to this. It's very much more like just a little, it feels like a little cruiser. It's nice to drive, but the engine isn't as responsive. This has a different back box, and that makes quite a big difference because it sounds pretty glorious. This has a wholly different character. It's also much more agile, and I'm sure that's down to the weight. It's really pointy. It feels very much like a sports car, whereas the original Z3, really, unless you go to the Z3Ms, never actually did. Now the BMW straight six, if I've said V6 earlier, ignore me, I always do that just because V6 comes into my head whenever I think of cylinder. But anyway, I do know it's a straight six. This straight six is a glorious engine from some of BMW's best days. It is just so nice, and when you have an exhaust on it, you really liberate the character. So yeah, the engine is glorious. I mean, the interior is standard Z3, which is definitely very much nice enough. It is lovely. In slower corners, you can bet the engine is so linear, it's so predictable what it's doing. It loves to spin up. And in slower corners, you can just get the back end to just break away ever so slightly, really predictably. And it's lovely. It's a really fun drive. Now we get onto the thorny issue of whether you should do something like this or not, and whether it's worth doing, and the even thornier issue of cost. Now when Jacob did this, I think he paid, if I remember rightly, about £3,000 for the donor car. So in those days, they really weren't worth very much, although the 3 litre always has commandeered a premium over the 2.8s, which are much more common. So good 3 litre nowadays, really you're looking at about 10 grand and above. And in those days though, it was about £3,000. The kit itself, I looked online, I spoke to Jacob, I think he paid £3,500 for it, but the last price I could find for it was about £3,700. Which isn't cheap, but you are essentially getting a whole new car. On top of that, you then need to consider the cost of actually painting it as well and doing the work. Like most kit car guys, Jacob did the work himself mostly, so that doesn't factor, but there is the paint. So all in all, I think that this car, then he did the Polyflex bushers, he did some other bits. That engine's glorious! But essentially, I think it owes him, if I'm correct, something in the lines of sort of 10 or 12 grand. So if you were to do it now, it probably wouldn't make much sense, not with the way that values have risen. Looks is a subjective thing, but certainly I know that when Jacob looked into it, he wanted something that was, he loved the Elise S1, but A, they were very expensive, and B, he wanted something that was usable. But although he liked the way a Z3 looked, he wanted something different. He didn't want something that everyone else had. And in that way, I can totally see why he did it. Personally, I love it. It's this one has a little bit of crazing on the fiberglass. The paint could probably do with sort of getting that sorted out. But generally, it's a lovely car. And I think he's got it up for sale for about £12,000. So if you're interested, it's somewhere on the internet. If you search for Bertini GT25 for sale, I'm sure it will come up. It's in a really nice sort of pearlescent blue colour. And I know who keeps it well. Anyway, I think, you know, I'm always for modifying your cars and making them your own. This is quite an extreme modification. You're not just putting some wheels on it or a tasty exhaust, but it definitely makes it into a car that nobody else has. So I'm all for it. Thank you all so much for watching. I really look forward to seeing you for the next one. If you have any questions, please contact me on Instagram. Please do subscribe if you haven't already. Really look forward to seeing you for the next video.